Hey, good evening, champions. Welcome to tonight's edition of the Motivation to Elevation podcast here on Facebook Live. And I trust that your day has been a blessed one, that has been peaceful. And we're just going to dive in. Again, my name is Arian Tyson. I'm from St. Louis, Missouri. And I am just going to do what I love to do. I love to inspire people. I love to motivate people. But I also challenge people. Because we go, and if we don't address certain things, the cycle will continue to repeat itself and repeat itself and repeat itself. And so, over this holiday weekend, and I trust that you all had a blessed Thanksgiving and so on and so forth. But after this holiday, this holiday was different for me. Many of you all know that this is the first holiday that I'm spending without my father, and a lot of things happen this year. This is the time of year where we reflect on what we've gone through and what has happened, what has transpired. Some things were good, some things were not so good. But the important thing is to understand that there is life after. And you may find yourself establishing new friendships and relationships. You may find yourself getting out of relationships. It may have been toxic or abusive. Having said that, something that was brought to you. And it's amazing how people stay in bad relationships. They stay in toxic relationships. And it has allowed me to ask this question. The question being, why do people stay in abusive relationships? And I've had a lot of people come to me in confidence, and no names will be mentioned, and have shared with me that they have been in abusive relationships. And it's very surprising to me. And so it has allowed me to really start researching, to really start talking about and really trying to promote a dialogue and just really try to educate people on why people stay in abusive relationships. So let's dive in, because I don't want to be on here all night. I'm mindful of your time, and I'm thanking you for watching. People who have never been abused often wonder why a person wouldn't just leave an abusive relationship. Now, I'm going to be honest with you. I was guilty of saying that once upon a time. And I was guilty of saying that for a long time. But people that normally say that, if you ask anyone that has ever been in an abusive relationship, they don't understand that breaking up with a person can be more complicated than it seems. Now, over the last couple of weeks, it has been revealed to me that several people close to me have been in abusive relationships. There are many reasons why both men and women stay in abusive relationships. And if you have a friend that's in an unhealthy or toxic relationship, support them by understanding why they may not choose to leave immediately. Hey, cuz. Now, last week, we talked about why you should let go of people in relationships. But allow me to explain tonight why people stay in abusive relationships. And these are things that I have learned from people talking to me. Now, I have myself have never been in an abusive relationship, and I have never abused anyone. But I do know a lot of people, family and friends, who have been in abusive relationships. And it took them a long time to get out of those relationships. And some of them probably are in an abusive relationship right now. They're just not saying anything. And there are several reasons behind that. Number one, they feel a variety of emotions. Well, what type of emotions am I talking about? I'm talking about fear. For example, your friend or the person that may be in an abusive relationship may be afraid of what will happen if they decide to leave the relationship. If your friend has been threatened by their partner, by their family, and that's it. They've done something wrong. I become involved with a partner. They may also worry that their friends and their family will judge them. Another issue is they may have developed low self-esteem. And what I mean by that is if that person is constantly, if that partner of that person is constantly putting them down and not edifying them and uplifting them, and blames them for everything, blames them for the abuse, it can easily make the person that's being abused believe that the statements are true and that the abuse is actually their fault. I have actually seen that happen. That's actually been told to me in confidence. And then another thing is they become all confused and conflicted when it comes to love. Because if that person may stay in an abusive relationship hoping that the abuser will change. And we just have to think about it. If a person you love tells you that they'll change, you want to believe them. And the person may only want the violence to stop, but not necessarily the relationship to end entirely. And that's something that we really have to be mindful of. There are always signs that are prevalent that a lot of times we may just flat out ignore. And another reason for that is because there is a lot of immense pressure that is felt when you're in a relationship, and it intensifies when you're in a marriage. And maybe you're in an abusive marriage or in a abusive relationship. There's a lot of social and peer pressure that comes with that. Now, for example, let's say that the person that's doing the abuse is popular. It can be hard for the person that's being abused for that person to tell their friends for fear that no one will believe them or that everyone will take the side of the abuser and not the abusee. Another reason being that I'm discovering is that it has a lot to do with maybe cultural or religious reasons. Now, traditional gender roles can make it difficult for young women, especially, to admit to being, sexually active, and for young men to admit to being abused. And also, we have to realize that that person's culture or religion may influence them to stay rather than end the relationship for fear of bringing shame upon their family or even upon themselves. Another reason could be pregnancy, parenting. Person may feel pressured to raise their children with both parents together. And we see nowadays where things are not the way they used to be, like it was back in the 50s, where there were mostly two parents in the home. Nowadays, unfortunately, there's mostly single parent homes. And when they feel the pressure to raise their children with both parents there, they feel it even if it means staying in an abusive relationship. And also the abusive partner may threaten to take or harm the children if the person tries to leave or if the person openly leaves. And I hope that you all are getting something out of this. And I know that we're kind of having technical difficulties, but hey, that's technology. You know, what can you do? But we're going to press on through it. We're going to soldier on anyhow. Something else that has been brought to my attention in just listening to people that have been in abusive relationships is one of the issues may be their reliance on an abusive partner. What do I mean by that? Money comes into the equation. For example, there may be a lack of money. The person may have become financially dependent on their abusive partner. And without money, it can seem impossible for them to leave the relationship because they don't know if they leave, they're probably saying to themselves, okay, what am I going to do? You know, so that's something to really pay attention to, which leads to this next point where they feel like they have nowhere to go. Even if they could leave, the person that's being abused may think that they have nowhere to go or no one to turn to once they've ended the relationship. And this feeling of helplessness can be especially strong if the person lives with the abusive partner. And then another reason would be because of disability. The person may be physically dependent upon their abusive partner, and they can feel that their well-being is connected to the relationship. And this dependency could heavily influence his or her decision to stay in an abusive relationship. And the reason that I said his or her is because men and women have been victims or have found themselves in abusive relationships. And for those that are just joining the party late, thank you for joining. Thank you for watching. I truly appreciate it. And if you haven't done so, if you find this valuable, feel free to share this on your wall. I truly appreciate it because at the end of the day, we don't know what people are going through. And a lot of people are suffering in silence. And they don't talk about it, so they keep stuff bottled in. And one thing about keeping stuff bottled in, if you don't have an outlet, you become a ticking time bomb and you will ultimately explode. So you have to be willing to talk to someone. Now, for someone who has been abused, what are some red flags involved in dealing with someone who has been abused? Now, this is not inclusive. It's not limited to this, but understand this. Dealing with someone who has been abused, and this is something that I have discovered. Dealing with someone who has been abused requires effective communication and patience. Patience is a virtue, and if you don't have it, don't waste your time and don't waste their time, because the abused person must first acknowledge and disclose that they've been abused. It's like carrying baggage into a new relationship. You're doing a disservice to the person that's new to your world or new to your life when you don't disclose that information. It's really unfair, and you have to really take them into consideration, because how can you expect them to understand where you're coming from if you don't disclose that information? The reason being is because how can you expect someone to understand if you're not being forthright with them? And this list I'm about to give you is not all inclusive. Some of these indicators that the relationship may become abusive. Some of these indicators may be that you're dealing with someone who has been abused. And others are positive indicators that you are becoming abusive or you're becoming involved with an abuser. For example, quick involvement. You ever heard someone say that they claim that they love someone at first sight? Or they make statements such as, you're the only one who can make him or her feel this way, or they pressure you for a commitment like it has to happen and it has to happen right now. And I'm talking about like 6 months or less, you're living together and possibly engaged. You know, that's something that is really prevalent in someone who may have been abused. Another thing, and this is a huge one, is controlling behavior. What I mean by that is they may do some things such as advising you how to dress without your asking for advice. Or they may pretend to be concerned for your safety or your productive use of your time. Another thing is they may act like you don't have the ability to make good decisions. And they monitor your phone, they monitor your email, and I'm kind of smiling because when I think about that, I always think about the movie Why Did I Get Married To? I always think about that because the girl that played Angela in the movie, you know, she was the crazy one, you know, and she was able to track you know, when Marcus was at his baby mama house and his resting heart rate and all this other stuff. That's signs of someone who not only may be crazy, but someone who may have been involved in an abusive relationship in the past. So that's something that you have to really be mindful of. And a big thing that's really important in recognizing is, and this is a huge one, and I can actually speak to this one, is isolation. What do I mean by that? They try to cut off all of your resources. They put down everybody that you know. They say that your friends are stupid, they're promiscuous. They accuse you of cheating with them. They say that your family is too controlling. They don't really love you, or that they're too dependent on you. They refuse to let you talk on the phone or use their car. They make it difficult for you to get around. They make it difficult for you to go to work. That's signs that people have been abused, or they may be involved in an abusive relationship. And that's something to really take into consideration. Another thing is they blame people and blame others for their problems. For example, if there are problems at school or problems at work, they always say it's somebody else's fault because the blame game is easy. But one thing that I learned a long time ago is that if you point your finger at somebody, you got 3 fingers pointing back at you. So that's something that we need to really be mindful of. And another thing is they blame you, or they say it's your fault that everything went wrong, or everything goes wrong in a relationship. They blame others for their feelings. Now, this is an important one because I'm not going to give somebody that much power over me to where they dictate my thought process, where they dictate how I move, etc. And this is important because they will make you feel responsible for how they feel. They'll say such things such as, you made me mad. You're hurting me by not doing what I asked, or I can't help being angry, or you make me happy, or you control how I feel. And normally someone who has been abused, they're hypersensitive. And I know that it's one thing to be sensitive, but it's another thing when that sensitivity is taken to a whole nother level. What do I mean by that? They're easily insulted. They see everything as a personal attack. And they have a tantrum about the injustice of the things that happen to them. And they look for arguments, or they look for fights, or they just intentionally try to start fights. And they make stuff, they blow stuff out of proportion. You know, they make a mountain out of a molehill. And they just totally go ballistic about small irritations, which can ultimately lead to them going into a relationship, a new relationship, and establishing unrealistic expectations. What do I mean? They compliment you in a way that makes you seem like you're superhuman. Let me reiterate something that I said last week. Every man is flawed. Every woman is flawed. And no matter what you do, or no matter what picture you try to paint or portray, you're going to mess up, especially in a relationship, because you're human. Above everything else, we're human. We are infallible beings. We're fallible beings. So we're going to make mistakes. It is what it is. And so another thing is, they're clingy to the point they're very dependent upon you for everything, every little thing. They expect you to be perfect. But like I just said, everybody is fallible. Everybody is flawed. So expecting perfection in a relationship, there's no such thing as the perfect guy. There's no such thing as the perfect woman. There's no such thing. And so when you go into something expecting the other person to be perfect, you're setting yourself up for failure. You're going to be let down. You're going to be disappointed. And it's when that disappointment hits, because it's going to happen. If they just freak out, it's a possibility that they may have been abused in their past. And I'm telling you what I observed, and I'm telling you, you know, from experience, because people have disclosed that to me, that this is what they've dealt with. And this is a huge thing. This is a huge thing. Jealousy plays a big part. This wanting to be with you constantly, like every hour on the hour. They may accuse you of cheating all the time. You know, they follow you around, or they make a bunch of phone calls. Now, understand, you know, when you're just starting out in a relationship, you know, that's good at first, but it gets stale and it gets boring, so to speak, where you keep getting like frequent calls during the day, because when a person has been hurt, let you slip up. Let you call them 3 or 4 times a day, and then it dwindles down to 1 time a day, or dwindles down to you might not have gotten a call. If somebody has been hurt, their emotions will start to run like crazy. They're thinking you somewhere that you're not, or they're thinking that you are doing some stuff you're not supposed to be doing. And it's just blowing stuff out of proportion. Our behaviors, like, you know, checking your car mileage. I mentioned the movie Why Did I Get Married Too? You know, and it's just crazy, you know, because she did that in the movie. You know, she knew the number of miles it took for Marcus to get to work. You know, it's just crazy. And Pierre, you're absolutely right, because when you are someone who desires to have a healthy relationship, you have to give the person a chance to miss you. You can't just go, you just can't spend all your time with the person because it gets it gets dull. You gotta have, friends. You can't sever your ties with those people who are positive in your life. Because everybody that says they're happy for you is not happy for you. And that's what you have to be mindful of. That's where you have to use discernment. You have to realize that everybody don't want to see you happy. And it's hard for somebody to wish somebody else happiness when they're not happy. So watching a friend go through an abusive relationship can be very scary. And you may feel like you're not sure how to help them. And the decision to leave can only be made by that person experiencing the abuse, because there are a lot of things you can do to help your friend stay safe. What can you do? Trust is a huge thing. Trust is a huge thing. What can you do? So here's some things that I've discovered that we could do. Don't be afraid to reach out to a friend who you think needs help. And I know that that could be kind of dicey when you're married, because, we grow up with this mentality that, whatever goes on in a marriage is between that man and that woman. But if you see somebody hurting and you say that you're their friend, it's nothing wrong with asking, are they okay? Because what will happen is it'll plant a seed that, okay, maybe they notice something or they genuinely care. Because people don't care how much you know until they know how much you care. It's just that simple. Also, be supportive. Tell them that you're concerned for their safety and you want to help. Acknowledge their feelings and be respectful of their decisions, because in the end, it's their decision. You can't necessarily tell them what to do. You can offer suggestions, but in the end, people are going to do what they want to do. Help your friend recognize that the abuse is not normal and it is not their fault. Everyone deserves a healthy, nonviolent relationship, men and women. Focus on the friend or the family member, not the abusive partner. Even if your loved one stays with their partner, it's important that they still feel comfortable talking to you about it. You gotta have an outlet. Even if they break up with the abusive partner, continue to be supportive after the relationship is over. And even if you feel like there's nothing you can do, don't forget that just by being supportive and caring, you're already doing a lot. And by all means, don't contact the abuser or publicly post negative things about them, because it only worsens the situation for the person that's being abused. So what happens when it's your friend or your family member who is the abuser? It's difficult to see someone you care about hurt others. You may not even want to admit that this person is abusive. But remember, when you remain silent or make excuses, you are encouraging their hurtful ways. And ultimately, the abuser is the only person who can decide to change. We can want somebody to change all day long, but they have to want to change. And it's not easy for abusive people to admit that their violent behavior is a choice and accept responsibility for it. And a lot of reason being is because they may feel a sense of embarrassment. Oh, my cousin saw you right on the money. I just noticed what she said. Yeah, a lot of people are silent because it's embarrassing. Yeah, and it's like, and that's so true. But ultimately, my response to that would be, people go about their lives but you're the one that has to deal with it. And you could choose to deal with it and get support, or you could choose to deal with it alone and it ultimately tear you up and it ultimately eats at you inside. And for those that are dealing with it, but dealing with it silently, I just would ask them a rhetorical question. How's that working out for them? So that's something we got to really take, be mindful of. Now, your friend may try to blame the victim for the abuse and not take responsibility. Don't support these feelings or help justify the abuse. Help the friend that's doing the abusing focus on the victim's feelings and the serious harm that they're experiencing. Don't support your friend's efforts to minimize the severity of their behavior. And don't ignore abuse when you see or hear about it, because your silence helps the abusive person deny their behavior is wrong. Stay in touch with your friend or family member about the abuse. Be there to support the abuser over the long term. Remind them that change will create a better and healthier relationship for both partners involved. And then ultimately set an example by having healthy relationships in your own life. Because whether we believe it or not, people are watching us, whether they tell us or whether they don't tell us. You don't know who's watching you. And then finally, being in an abusive relationship could happen to anyone, regardless of their race, regardless of their gender, regardless of their cultural background or their religious affiliation that they belong to. And I can admit that it will not be easy for you to just quit the abusive relationship. That's something that I've learned just by having people talk to me and just really bare their soul to me. But for your sanity and for your peace of mind, you need to really take some of those concrete steps, because there is life after, and you have to get around an environment that's going to encourage you to really talk about it. And I've said it often, more times than a few, that there is power in your story, and nobody can tell your story better than you. So with that being said, I'm going to wrap this up. I went just a couple minutes over, but it was a very sensitive subject because we don't know what people are going through. And day by day, I'm finding out that people are dealing with this issue. This is a serious issue. And it's not just women, it's men. Because at the end of the day, the effects of it is catastrophic. They may give up on love, or they may give up on being in a fruitful relationship, or even get to the point where they feel like they're not worthy. Jamise just mentioned about having, low self-confidence. When you've been abused, your confidence will shrink for a while. And so that's why it's important that you get around somebody that's going to edify you, that you have a mate that's going to be able to speak life into you, even when you feel like you're at the end of your rope. And if you're not getting that, then you really need to take a serious inventory on what's really going on. Now, I'm all for love, and I'm all for, seeing relationships work, and I would never tell somebody what to do, because ultimately at the end of the day, they're going to do what they want to do anyway. But it is my responsibility, and it is our responsibility, if we say we love that person, if we say that we're a real friend, to tell them the truth, even if it hurts. Because one thing they won't be able to say is, why didn't nobody tell me? When you tell them the truth, you allow them to realize, maybe they need to sit back and maybe need to rethink this thing. Even if it means they change some things. Even if it means they don't change anything at all. They won't be able to say nobody told them. And so if you got value from this, please let me know in the comment section. If you got value from this, feel free to share this with somebody that you know is in a relationship that ain't got no business being in. Especially if they're suffering from physical, mental, emotional abuse. And you're right. At the end of the day, they can either accept it or they can reject it. The choice is theirs. But at least you allow them to know, hey, there's life after. You do have an option. You don't have to, you deserve better than where you are right now. And you could choose to stay there, or you could choose to do something better. So with that being said, I'm going to call this a wrap. Thank you so much for those who hopped on. And I will be back next Tuesday, same time. I will keep it to 30 minutes or less. This is the first time I actually went over 30 minutes, but just by a little taste. But it's a sensitive subject, and it's really something that I really feel the need to talk about, just to really be able to, educate people, because I have friends and family that are going through this issue, and I never would have thought it. But they came to me, and they love me enough to, to disclose that information, because they know I'm not going to judge them, and you could potentially help someone, before it's too late. So with that being said, I'll wrap this up. I will be back next Tuesday, 9:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, 8:30 Central Standard Time, on the next edition of the Motivation to Elevation podcast. Once again, it's yours truly, Arian Tyson, signing off. Good night. Peace.